So good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second session of our first Friday Food Safety webinar series. I am Nicole Cook. I'm one of the legal specialists with the Ag Law Education Initiative. My office is on the University of Maryland Eastern Shore campus. I do want to remind folks to please go ahead and type your questions into the chat box, and then I'll be able to answer those at the end of the program. So today, we're going to dig a little deeper into worker training requirements under the Food Safety Modernization Act. Just to, by way of introduction about the ALEI program, ALEI is an initiative and a collaboration between the University of Maryland Francis King Carey School and the College of Agriculture and Natural Resources at the University of Maryland College Park, and also then the School of Agricultural and Natural Sciences at the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. And there are ways that you can follow and find out more information about the work that we do. One is by following our website at umaglaw.org. We also do tweet on Twitter. We have a Facebook page that you can like and follow. And we do have an email address that we do check the inbox for our email address. So if you have some questions, send those to us by email. We also have an information line, and you can call us on that number. We, again, can't give out specific legal advice, but we can give you a general information about the law, and we can certainly help you find legal resources in your area. Obviously, any lawyer is going to give you a disclaimer. This is our disclaimer. This presentation is intended just to give you some general information, some general legal information, and shouldn't be construed as providing specific legal advice. If you have particular questions about your particular farming operation, we're going to encourage you to reach out to a private attorney for more information about your particular matter. Okay. So a little background on the Food Safety Modernization Act. It was a piece of legislation that was passed by Congress on December 21st in 2010, and it really transformed the FDA's approach from investigating foodborne illnesses that had already, or foodborne illness outbreaks that had already happened, to trying to instead to prevent outbreaks from occurring in the first place. And the Produce Safety Rule is one of the many rules of the Food Safety Modernization Act. The Produce Safety Rule establishes for the first time science-based minimum standards for the safe growing, harvesting, packing, and holding of fruits and vegetables grown for human consumption. The worker health, hygiene, and training requirements are then one part of the Produce Safety Rule. So with FSMA, new standards beyond the Good Agricultural Practices requirements, or GAP requirements, were introduced for worker training, health, and hygiene requirements. And these standards require that farms identify a supervisor to ensure produce safety rule compliance by workers, establish qualifications and training requirements for all personnel who handle covered produce or food contact surfaces, and also their supervisors. It also calls for documentation of required training and implements hygienic practices and other measures needed to prevent persons from contaminating produce with microorganisms of public health significance. So under the worker qualification requirements, the rules say that management is required to ensure that all employees who manufacture, process, pack, or hold food are qualified to perform their assigned duties. And those employees must have the necessary combination of education, training, and/or experience necessary to manufacture, process, pack, or hold clean and safe food. And the individuals must receive training in the principles of food hygiene and food safety, including the importance of employee health and hygiene. So what's required for the training for the farm's workers. Any newly hired worker must be trained upon starting their job. Temporary, part-time, seasonal, and contract workers all must be trained. And if you use farm labor contractors, you want to know that you must receive written assurance from that contractor that those workers have been trained. Workers must be trained at least once a year, and more training is going to be required if the farm is found not to be complying with the produce rule standards, or if you find that your workers are not complying with the standards as you've trained them. So that leads me to discussing the need then for possibly need for repeated trainings, and that is that under the rule actually requires that training must be repeated as necessary and appropriate in light of observations or information indicating that personnel are not meeting required standards. So basically, you need to have some way of assessing whether your workers are failing to follow food safety protocols, and if they are, then you must repeat their training under the rule. So training for workers must include the principles of food hygiene and food safety, which everybody has covered in the grower training, recognizing symptoms of a health condition that is reasonably likely to result in contamination of covered produce or food contact surfaces with microorganisms of public health significance, and the standards established by the FDA in the produce rule that are applicable to the employee's job. And I want to stress here that under the produce safety rule, you're required to provide your workers with training that is appropriate to their duties. So basically, you can't just do a basic, how to wash your hands and don't come to work sick training. You do need to do the trainings that are applicable to the employee's job responsibilities. And we know that proof that you've done that specialized training is something that auditors will be looking for. And I'm going to talk to you more about how you document that you provided that required training in a bit. So harvest workers, as you may remember from your grower training, harvest workers must receive additional special training beyond the hygiene, et cetera, training. That training has to include recognizing covered produce that must never be harvested, such as never harvest produce that has been contaminated with feces, never pick up dropped produce from the ground. It also has to include inspecting harvesting containers or equipment to make sure that they are clean, and correcting or reporting problems with harvesting equipment or containers. Okay. So Section 112.21c requires that training must be done in a manner that's easily understood by workers. And that means that it needs to be done in their native language if they're not native English speakers, and using pictures and demonstrations for workers who may not be able to read, for instance. So you need to find a way to make the training easily understood by your workers. And there are some resources, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the resources that are available to help with that. So for instance, So there are all those requirements for who, what, and how to train workers, but there are resources available to help growers meet those requirements. In fact, the Maryland Department of Agriculture has a training video, and you can contact Deanna Baldwin at MDA for more information about those. Also, the Produce Safety Alliance has an English and a Spanish version video on YouTube, and that's the link that I have here. That particular video covers hand washing, but it's part of a series of training videos that the Produce Safety Alliance is going to be putting together and making available online. So those are some newer resources coming available. Also, Cornell University's National Good Agricultural Practices program has a 15-minute video available on YouTube designed to be part of a comprehensive worker training program. The video offers guidance to workers on proper hand washing, toilet use, with emphasis on how their health affects the safety of fresh fruits and vegetables. The video is also available on DVD and VHS formats. I know, for instance, I have the DVD available to loan out to folks. I'm sure they have that at the Maryland Department of Ag. And each video contains both English and Spanish versions. So the links here are the links to how to access those resources. And hygiene topics that are discussed in those videos are actually reinforced then in the Field Hygiene Poster Series from Cornell University's National Good Agricultural Practices Program. And again, these are posters. I know I have these, and that they're available to folks through the Maryland Department of Ag, and I think also through various extension offices. Just some additional training resources. Here's one from Penn State. It's actually it's got a downloadable PDF, but you can also find the information on their website and interact with it. And if you're needing assistance in trying to locate additional resources, please just reach out to myself, to my colleague Sarah Everhart, to any of your extension agents that do the trainings, and certainly to the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Okay, so not only does FSMA require that workers receive food safety training that is applicable to their job, but you also have to be able to demonstrate that through records that you provided that job-specific training. You need to have some record showing that you trained your workers on food safety protocols related to the specific work that they do on your farm. Also, at the trainings, you will need a sign-in sheet, and you will have to have a supervisor sign and date the training log. Oops. So record keeping, but record keeping doesn't have to be difficult, and there's lots of templates out there for the various records that are required under FSMA. This is one example of one farm's record of worker training. And it meets all of the requirements. It's clear who provided the training, who attended the training, when the training occurred, what the workers were trained on under the topics, and it was signed off on by a supervisor within a reasonable period of time, which we see here it was within a couple of weeks. Some additional formats that you can find for record keeping. Here's one put out by the University of Vermont. I believe that's the University of Vermont, yeah, UVM. Here's another that's actually put out by the Produce Safety Alliance, and you can find those online. Those are links there. So for more information on compliance with FSMA, I want you to check out ALEI's food safety page, and the link to that is if you can access it off of our website. Our website, again, is umaglaw.org. Also, I want to make sure that people are aware that there's more upcoming grower trainings happening in Maryland. There's one on February 11th in St. Mary's County Extension Office, one on February 20th at the Frederick County Extension Office, and one coming up in December, on December 11th here on the University of Maryland Eastern Shore campus. Also, there's upcoming GAP trainings. UMD, UME, and MDA are going to be offering 3 courses on food safety for fruit and vegetable growers. The first is a basic GAP training on February 25th at the Y Research Center. The second is an advanced GAP training on February 27th at MDA. At the MDA office in Annapolis, and then a basic GAP training again on March 18th at the Baltimore City Extension Office. Okay, and there's my contact number. And I'm going to bring this down now and look for questions if we have any questions. Okay. I'm not, let's see, I don't think I'm seeing any questions. No questions? Hopefully I'm not missing them. Well, I'm going to give people a few minutes to type any questions that they might have. Oh. And I think Sarah's posting information to remind folks that a recording of this webinar is going to be posted to the ALEI website following today's training. And that website is, again, umaglaw.org, umaglaw.org. And don't forget that our next program is going to be March 1st on water testing, updates on water testing requirements. Okay, I don't see any other questions, but you know how to contact us if you have any other questions. Oh, wait. On the dropped produce that you mentioned before. So we have a question about, can I clarify on the dropped produce that you mentioned before? If you remember, as part of the growers training, part of the training for your field workers and harvesters is not to be picking up produce that's fallen on to the ground. Sorry, I'm looking for something right now, but if it's part of the harvesting process, things like if it's part of the harvesting process and there's a means to do it, obviously to avoid contamination, that would be something that yeah, you would be training them about how to do that in a way. All I can think of right now is the almond example, but yeah, tree shaking, yeah, Adam, exactly. Of course, yeah. Does that answer your question? Great. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and I hope everybody stays warm and has a nice weekend.